Hi guys, in this video we are going to go over the Unit 2 study guide. Unit 2 was all about equations, and instead of solving the problems on the study guide, I'm doing it on this whiteboard app because the study guide didn't have a lot of space and I can write small with a real pen or pencil, but not so much with the stylus on the screen. So I've copied all of the problems over onto these whiteboard pages, and you can follow along with me on that study guide. So I'm going to switch colors here. First thing I always do when solving any equation is draw the line down the equal sign. Now, you may or may not need to do that, but I find that it helps people keep the two sides of the equation separate, and it helps them know what they're supposed to do. So when I see parentheses like this, I know that I'm going to have to do the distributive property. And remember that in a situation where you have like the x plus 2 in parentheses with no number in front of it, this is really a -1, and we are distributing a -1. So -5 times x is -5x. -5 times -2 is +10. Be very careful with your signs. -1 times x is -1x, and -1 times 2 is -2. The next thing we would do is combine our like terms. So I see that I have a -5x and a -1x. That makes -6x. I also have a +10 and a -2. That makes +8 equals 50. Now I'm going to make a zero pair with the constant 8 so that I can eliminate that from the left side of the equation. I'm left with -6x equals 42. And my last step, to eliminate my coefficient of -6, I would divide both sides by -6, giving me x equals -7. Okay? Moving on to our second problem. I think I'll pick green this time. Why not? I see parentheses, so the first thing I'm going to do is my distributive property. So I have 8. -3 times k is -3k. -3 times 2 is -6. Keep what's on the right side of the equation. Now, some people will notice right away that you've got k's on both sides, but I'm going to ignore that for a minute because I see also that I have some like terms. I want to simplify each side of the equation as much as possible before I start zero pairing anything. So I'm going to keep my -3k, but 8 minus 6 is 2. Okay, now that I have one variable and one constant on each side, now is the time when I could zero pair. So I always want to eliminate a variable first. So I am not going to subtract 2. I'm going to add 3k. And if you'll notice, I end up with zero pairs on both sides. And what I have is 2 equals 2. Remember, excuse me, that you are allowed to have an answer like this. And when you have a number equals itself, this indicates infinite solutions to the equation. Okay. Moving over to my next problem, I'm going to go to light blue, I think. There we go. On the left side of the equation, I have, remember, a -1 in front of that parentheses, and I'm going to do distributive property. So I have 3w minus 7w minus 12. I also have distributive property on the right side, 2w minus 6. I'm going to combine my like terms on the left, -4w minus 12 equals 2w minus 6. Now I'm going to always eliminate a variable first, and I have a -4w and a +2w. I like to always eliminate the smaller one because then my final coefficient turns out to be positive. So since -4 is smaller than 2, I'm going to zero pair the -4w. Go back to blue here. That leaves me with 6w minus 6. Now, zero pair your constant. That leaves me with negative 6 equals 6w. Divide by 6. And we're going to get w is equal to negative 1. Remember that if you have a variable equals a number, that indicates that you have one solution, and this is it, negative 1. All right, moving on. Let me go back to red here. The next problem, I see distributive property, so I have negative 7a plus 21. Be careful of your signs. I have a variable and a constant on the left, a variable and a constant on the right, so I'm going to eliminate a variable. They are the same variable, negative 7a, negative 7a, so it doesn't matter which one I eliminate. I'm going to get 0 pairs on both sides, and what I'm left with is 21 equals 11. When you have a solution like this, where the numbers are actually not equal, that indicates no solution. There is no value of a that you could substitute in to make this equation true. Moving on to our next problem. I'm going to start with my distributive property. You see I have it on both sides, so I'm going to have 9n minus 36 minus 7n equals 32 minus 2n minus 16. Combine your like terms. There's 2n. Keep the minus 36. I only have one n on this side, so I'm going to keep it, but I have two constants. 32 minus 16 is positive 16. I got a variable on each side. I'm going to eliminate the smaller one, which is the negative 2n, so I'm going to add 2n on both sides. That gives me a 0 pair on the right, but a 4n on the left. 0 pair my extra constant. Divide by the coefficient. N is equal to 13. And one more problem like these. Again, I've got distributive property here, but also right after that, remember that there's really a negative 1 in front of those parentheses. So I have 16y, that 6 didn't turn out very good, minus 12, minus 1y, plus 5. 16y minus 1y is 15y. Negative 12 plus 5 is negative 7. Add 7 to both sides. Divide by your coefficient. Okay. So as a real quick review about solutions, no solution would be when you had a number that equaled a completely different number, something like this. It could also look like this. Remember that 2 and negative 2 are not the same number. Infinite solutions is when you have a number that equals itself. 10 equals 10, or negative 8 equals negative 8. One solution is when you have variable equals a number, okay, or number equals a variable, either way. All right, don't forget about those. Now, we're going to talk about equations with fractions. So, what we're not going to do is freak out about that 2/3 in the front. We are going to go ahead and whenever I see the distributive property with a fraction, I always go ahead and multiply. And we're going to let Desmos do this for us if you're not sure about fractions. So negative 2/3 times 5x is really negative 2/3 times 5. So let me pop open Desmos. And I can do negative 2/3 times 5. And you see that it's negative 3.3333. Hit the little buttons, negative 10/3. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. Sorry, guys. There it is. Now, our answer was negative 10 thirds. That is basically the same as multiplying the numerator times this number, negative 10 thirds. And don't forget the x. So if we do the same thing with the 3, if I multiply the numerator times 3, I get negative 6. And then this third stays. 16, I've got a negative 1 here to distribute. Okay? Now you're thinking, but Ms. Bryant, you just made that worse. Now I have lots of fractions. Well, here's the step where we're going to get rid of this fraction. I'm going to put giant parentheses, and I'm going to make my own distributive property and multiply everything times 3. If you have a fraction with a denominator that is the same as the number you're multiplying, the denominator basically cancels out, and you're left with your numerator. On the other side, we're going to actually have to distribute a 3. 16 times 3 is 48. Negative 8 times 3 is negative 24. And negative 2x times 3 is negative 6x. All right. From here, we solve the problem the same way. I have like terms right here. I'm going to zero pair my smaller variable, which is negative 10x. Zero pair my extra constant. And let me move over here. I guess I don't have space underneath. Negative 30. I would divide by 4. And if I do negative 30 divided by 4, I'm going to get a decimal, but we don't do decimals, so we're just going to simplify this by dividing numerator and denominator by 2. Next one. Ooh, let's go for purple. All right, we have no distributive property in this one, so we can go straight to eliminating these fractions by multiplying everything times 2. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 5 halves, since the 2 matches, get rid of it, minus 5c. 2 times 1 half is 1. C times 2 is 2c, and negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Now we can solve like normal. I have like terms right here. I'm going to zero pair my smaller variable. Zero pair my constant. Divide by my coefficient. 15/7 cannot be simplified, so that is our final answer. Okay? Now, moving on to proportions. So if you remember, a proportion is two fractions that are equal to each other. And when two fractions are equal to each other, you are allowed to, let me switch colors, you are allowed to cross multiply. And in fact, this is the only time that you can cross multiplies, when you have two fractions that are equal to each other. So 2 times x plus 8, I'm going to write like this. It's 2 times the whole thing. I can't write it like this because that would give me 2x plus 8, and that's not really, it's not just 2 times x, it's 2 times all of it. So we have to put the x plus 8 in parentheses, and 9 times 4. This is really what it looks like. Then I distribute. 0 pair my constant. Divide by 2. X equals 10. The only place really for you to get tricked is if you're not careful enough to use parentheses here. All right, let's try another one. 3 times x minus 6 would be written like this. 6 times x minus 3 would be written like this. Once you're here, you can distribute. Eliminate your variable first. Eliminate your constant. Divide by your coefficient. All right, guys, here's another proportion. So 3 times y minus 7, and then 5 times y minus 5. Distributive property on both sides, 3y minus 21, 5y minus 25. Always eliminate your variable first, so I'll eliminate my smaller variable, negative 3y. Zero pair my constant of 20 plus 25. And divide by 2. Y equals 2. Okay. And I think we've got one more here. It doesn't matter which side you put first. You could do the 6 times y minus 7 or the 2 times 2y minus 5. It's totally up to you. They're going to be equal to each other anyway, so that doesn't matter. Distributive property, 4y minus 10, 6y minus 42. Eliminate a variable first. I'm going to subtract 4y. Now eliminate my constant, add 42. There's my kitty cat. And divide by my coefficient of 2. Y equals 16. Okay, I think most of you guys did pretty well on that when we did it in class. The hardest part of this unit was by far the literal equations. And remember, a literal equation is just any equation with more than one variable. And I don't mean 2x equals 5x plus 1. This is considered the same variable. What we mean is 2x equals 5y plus 1, two completely different variables. And we can solve these equations for a variable by following the same laws of equations that we've done to this point. So I want to solve I equals PRT for t, which means that I want to get rid of the p and the r. So I have to look at how they're attached to the t. PRT means p times r times t. So what I could do is I could divide both sides by PR. These two, p divided by p is 1, r divided by r is 1. So that leaves me with just my t. And this side cannot be simplified. And there you go. Yes, Miss Kitty. She's not very happy with me right now. She wants attention. All right. AX plus BY equals C. This is a linear equation in standard form. We're going to solve it for Y. So here's where I need to isolate. Since I have a plus sign here, what I want to do first is get rid of this whole term. So I'm going to subtract AX. Now, that gives me BY equals C minus AX, okay? Because C and AX are not like terms, so I can't simplify. Now, if I want y by itself, I need to get rid of the b, which means I'll divide, because b divided by b is 1. What I have to do is divide the entire other side by b, not just the c, not just the ax, but the whole thing. And I cannot simplify anything here. There's nothing to cancel out, so that is the end. Looking at our next one, we're going to solve this one for b. So you see that we have b is trapped inside the parentheses here, but a plus b in parentheses is being multiplied on one side by 1/2, and it's being multiplied on the other side by h. So what we can do is we have a couple different options. What I'd really like to do is get rid of this fraction. So I'm going to multiply everything by 2. Now, 2 times a on the left is 2a. On the left side, since everything here is being multiplied, it's half of all of this stuff. So half of this stuff times 2 is really 1. And really, I can even get away with just not even writing the 1. Okay? Now, before I can touch the a plus b, I really need to get rid of that h. I'm going to divide by h because that will cancel out. And here I can drop my parentheses. And now what I need to do is subtract a. And what we're going to end up with is 2a over h minus a equals b. This was probably the most confusing one that I saw you guys have to tackle, and it, I think, goes back to this 1/2 up here. Hopefully you won't see one that difficult as we go forward. Here we're going to solve, some of you may recognize the surface area of a cylinder formula. We're going to solve this one for h. So here's the h right here. Since I've got this plus sign, the first thing I'm going to do is subtract this whole term. 2 pi r squared minus 2 pi r squared cancels out. Now, for here, these are not like terms, so I'm going to have to write it like this. All right. Now, to isolate the h, I need to divide by 2 pi r. So the 2, the pi, and the r all cancel out. Over here, we're going to do like that. Now, what we could do is, since it is possible to simplify right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the division. So I'm going to say a divided by 2 pi r minus 2 pi r squared divided by 2 pi r. Now, there's nothing I can do here. So a over 2 pi r is going to stay. But these 2's, these pi's, and you guys know now that r squared divided by r is just r, gives us this. This is our simplified form. And we have one more left. This is where you're most likely to need to know how to solve a literal equation. We have a linear equation in standard form, and we want to put it in basically y equals mx plus b form. We're solving it for y. So I need to isolate the y. First thing I want to do is get rid of this 2x. So I'm going to subtract on both sides. I have negative 5y equals 12 minus 2x. Or, if you really want it in y equals mx plus b form, flip those around. And then you're going to divide everything by negative 5. None of these simplify. Negative 2 over negative 5 makes positive, so this is 2/5 x. Minus, because we have plus and minus, 12/5. And that, guys, is everything that you needed for the Unit 2 study guide. I know some of these equations were really tough, so please email me or leave a comment with your name, please. And I'll answer you as best I can. So see you guys next time. Bye.